All right, this is Sue Frederick doing the second class in the Sacred Numerology class of 2023. And I am absolutely thrilled to be here with all of you. I love all these people so much and know many of them from classes and sessions. So very grateful for all of you. And tonight I'm so excited because our agenda is the name number, which is so fun. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. The personal years, really digging into that, which is always illuminating, and then soul agreements. So those three things will be our primary focus. However, we are also going to answer questions and just do a little review to make sure everybody is kind of caught up and good to go. And in my very Virgo way, I made a whole new workbook, a whole new PowerPoint for class tonight. So I'm really jazzed about that because I think it'll be more helpful. And so let's pray in. So we're going to close our eyes and take a deep breath. And in this sacred space where we come together for higher learning, we all open our hearts and minds to receive exactly what we need and want to receive, the knowledge, the sacred knowledge that exists in the divine realms to help us find our way here. And tonight we have gratitude for Pythagoras, who is teaching this through us tonight, and for all the signs and wonderful ways that this divine order universe tries to help us remember our soul's journey. And so it is. So first I thought we should start with questions because I know some of you had already asked me questions. I got a lot of emails with making sure people had figured out their path correctly. So I think we're good on that. But if you still aren't sure about your path, you're going to have to actually, we'll do a few breakout rooms where maybe somebody in the group can help you make sure you have your path. But everybody here who's emailed me, I responded to. So, and then tonight, I'm going to open my workbook so that when you ask a question, I'll have this here. So let me get this up. All righty. So on your screen, you should see the 3 ways to add your date of birth. I just thought I would start there in case anybody has a question about that, because that is the one that sometimes confuses people. But maybe you guys have all got that figured out. So if you have a question, please speak up, because when I'm screen sharing, I really can't see a lot of people here. So don't raise your hand. I won't see you. Just unmute yourself and jump in.
I have a question.
All right.
I figured mine out right, but one of the questions I had is when your birth date, the date of the month, and it's like a 20 or a 23, do you add those together first before you add them all up?
So there's 3 ways of doing this. So in the linear method, you just put them all out in a single digit. So for example, on the screen, May 1st, 1960. Wait, there's another example that I thought, okay. There. So this is September 15th, and it shows that you would, not for the linear way. The linear way, you always just do 1 digit at a time. But when you are doing it the other 2 ways, you add that 15 and get the 6, you add the 1951 and get the 7, so that you can do it the linear way. But the only reason you ever have to do it the 3 ways, well, for one thing, to check your addition. And I know this is ridiculous, but every client that I ever prep a chart for, I add it all 3 ways, even if they're not ending up with a 2, 4, or 6. which are the master soul numbers that you have to make sure that if it's an 11-2 or a 22-4 or 33-6. However, from my personal way of doing my charts for clients, there is some energy that I get in adding their birth dates the 3 different ways. It also confirms for me that I haven't made a mistake, because sometimes we think, oh, well, this is simple addition. Well, I learned early on in my career that you do not want to do a chart for someone and then find out that you added it wrong. So I always add it the 3 ways, no matter how it's showing up. And even when I used to do live readings on the radio for people and use numbers, that was really fun. That I used to do that about, 15 years ago or so, when my books were popular. And people would call in and they'd give you the birth date live on air, and I'd have to add it really quickly, but I'd find myself doing it the 3 ways anyway, because it just gave me more energy, more vibration to kind of read from. So the 3 ways are helpful. And the other thing you're going to find is, I don't think any other numerologists teach the 3 ways, and except people I've trained myself. But what you'll learn is some people will reach out and say, oh, I'm a 2 path. Somebody else told me I was a 2. And you do their chart and no, they're an 11/2, and one of the 3 ways you add it. And that's a significant difference between a 2 path, because it means they have that extraordinary sensitivity and intuition working with them as well. So you really do want to do the 3 ways to see the bigger picture of what your soul signed up for in this life. And I just want to add again that this is not us saying, wow, turns out I'm a 4 path, and so randomly this means I behave like this. No, flip that around. My soul chose the 22/4 path because I needed to learn and work on such and such. And this path was going to kind of make me do it. I mean, everything is free will here too, but I've never met a 4 path soul whose work is not extraordinarily important to them and who doesn't work a lot. I really love 4 path souls for that reason, because they don't take a lot of vacations like me. So anyway, that's the 3. And I think it's always important to do it that way. It's always going to help you. Any questions before we move on from the birth path and how to calculate it?
Hi, Sue. My name is Anna. I missed the class last week, but I did watch the replay that you sent. Thank you very much.
Good.
And so my birthday is 2/21/1967. And so what I got from that is a 28/1, a 10/1, and a 19/1.
Yeah, you're definitely a 1 path. And the February 21 means that you're a Pisces.
Yes, I am.
So the Pisces 1, that's a very sensitive path, Anna. And, and yet you're here to be a leader as well. But for your soul, it's a sense that you don't want to be left behind or left out, and you want to be included. And that's kind of some of the self-doubt that you're overcoming in this journey. But for you, the answer is always about looking up, looking at the divine for your answers, because you have, with the Pisces energy, such a pure channel to that higher wisdom. And it's going to solve any emotional issues that come into your heart by asking spirit for help, asking guidance from the divine. And once you do that, it'll resolve a lot of things for you. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sweetie. All right. I was thinking today about how one of the remedies for human life, because human life is challenging, the earth realm is one of the hardest worlds that you could possibly incarnate into. I was doing a session with somebody today, and we figured out that they were an interplanetary soul, that they had incarnated in a much more evolved galaxy before, and this was their first time on incarnating on Earth, and that they were just shocked by the unconsciousness of so much of humanity here. And I said, well, that's why you came here, to help wake it up, you know. But the reason that we get lost is always because our focus only gets just glued upon the physical world in front of us and the daily details of the mundane. And that will exhaust us emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically. And the recharge, the refresh, always comes from looking up and connecting to divine, or going to the divine first to solve your problems. So let me give you a really good specific example of that. You know, at my age, working with technology, even working with PowerPoint, working with all this stuff, I can get frustrated. And so I've learned that if I'm having a tech problem, I don't have a full-time tech guy. I have a person I can email, and when he has time, he emails me back. So what I've learned is, if I'm having a tech problem with something, I have to first go to the divine and put out my prayer, and I'll specifically call on certain departed loved ones who were good with technology when they were here, and also just call on my spirit guides and angels and say, you guys have to solve this because I can't do it, and I need to get this work done. And then I put the problem out of my mind. And that's what we have to do. You have to get it out of your human mind, because your problem will not be solved through your human mind. And once you've given it off to God, to spirit, it gets taken care of, and it comes back to you at the right time, in the right way, with the right solution. Does that make sense? All right, so let's keep moving here to the next thing I was so excited to do today. Where are we? Sorry, just taking me a minute. See how big this workbook is now that I've revamped it. It's got a ton of pages. All right, we're going to go first to soul agreements, because that's easy. We covered it a little bit last week. You guys can hear me, right? Somebody needs to say yes, because I can't see you all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. Soul agreements are so easy and so fun. And right now, take out your notebook or your workbook, and your birth path that we've just calculated, add it to the birth path of your partner or your child or your parent, whoever it is you're most curious about, and you'll get a double-digit number probably. And then reduce that to a single digit, and you get your soul agreement number with that person. And it explains so much about what you two souls agreed to do and be with each other in this lifetime. So, for example, and these are all here in this new workbook, so I don't need to go through and read all this. You guys have this now in the new one, I'm pretty sure, unless I messed that up technology wise, but it should be in your new one. If not, I'll actually put the link into the email that I send out tonight with the recording, just to make sure everybody has it. But for example, I know that in my life, if I have a relationship agreement, I'm trying to find the right page here. If I have a relationship agreement of the number 11 with someone, then I have just this pure intuitive understanding of them from day one. It's not even something I have to work to get, you know. And I also know that our intuitive connection will be so loud that sometimes we'll have, you know, even fights in our thoughts without having a real conversation. So that's the downside of it. But I love having a soul agreement of 11 with someone. And yet the different kind of energy, just to show you, is that and if you have a soul agreement of a master number with someone like 22, it means you're going to do incredible work together to help bring new ideas to the world. And that I've had some of those be extraordinary also in my life. And if you have the soul agreement of the number 5, that is so fun and passionate and all that great stuff, but you're always pushing each other to grow and expand. A soul agreement of 6 is very lovey-dovey, very soft and cushy, and it's like what you want with your home relationships and your people who make you feel like you can just relax with them and be loved by them. The challenge of that number is that you can lose yourself in the other person. If you're married to somebody and the soul agreement you have with them is 6, you can easily kind of lose your own sense of worth and self because you're so aware of what they need and so willing to love them and give whatever they need to them. So all of these are just so helpful, and they also help you quit looking at something as good or bad, which is the human mind in action. So for example, if I have a soul agreement, back in the days when I worked for a magazine as an editor of content, I would always get everybody's birth date and figured out what my team, my editorial team and my design team, what all their paths were and what our agreements were. That's highly illegal, by the way, but it was the 80s and the 90s. And so I could get away with it. But so for example, if you have a soul agreement of the number 8, you are going to have to hold your power with that person. And yes, it'll be exciting, but there will be a power play as part of the relationship. Especially if it's with your partner, you want to make sure that you're on the positive side of that 8 agreement, that you're both empowering each other and that neither of you is either giving your power away or abusing your power with that person. And that's interesting too when it's with your child, because that can mean that you have to be very careful as a parent that you are not just overpowering that child and not even realizing it. And then as they grow up a little, you might find out that, wow, they're more powerful than me and they're kind of using their power with me. So I've got to stand in my center. And those kinds of understandings are so helpful. And even when you talk to the other person, if you're struggling with someone and say, hey, look, just for a minute, I want you to think about the possibility that our souls agree to learn about balancing our power in this relationship, in this lifetime, maybe in other lifetimes. I was a servant and you were the boss or something like that. And in this life, we're trying to flip it so that I learn to stand in my power with you. That kind of a conversation takes away the diminishment of another person, any kind of blame, any kind of, you're bad, you did this. It just brings the whole understanding of the relationship to a new level. So use these soul agreement numbers to really help you make peace with people in your life and spouses and children and all of that good stuff. I find it so helpful. So any questions about soul agreements?
Yeah, I have a question. So if one of you is an 11 and one of you is a 9, do you add up 2 and 9 or do you add up 11 and 9?
You have an 11 soul agreement number.
Okay.
And is that your spouse or who is that?
My son was an 11.
Oh, right. Sarah, beautiful Sarah. Yes, yes. Yep. That pure intuitive connection that continues easily beyond death. Yeah. And my heart is with you, honey. So you might notice that someone you love who's on the other side, well, actually, I don't even believe they're on the other side anymore. I believe they're present for us. We just have to shift our perspective so we can see it differently. But if you have an 11 soul agreement with a departed loved one, you can so easily connect to them. Don't ever doubt it. And any signs that you get from them, never question it. They are just right there giving you auditory, visual, cognitive knowingness, every kind of awareness possible for you to know that they're with you. All right. Any other questions about soul agreements before we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sharon and Nikki. So maybe one of you go first. I don't know who.
Okay.
Sharon, I'll go last. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have a question. I have a soul agreement. My partner of the last 10 years just died right before Christmas, and our soul agreement was an 8. Now, okay, so we dated, and he was my high school prom date and boyfriend, and then we dated other people and all that, and then we, in college, and then we married other people. And those are kind of disasters, but it took us 50 years to get back together. I'm 82, by the way. So it took us 50 years to get back together. So we've lived together the last 10 years, and then he died. We made the agreement when we got together that we knew that at the age 70 or so, that one of us was going to die first. That's pretty right there in your face. But we talked many times that had we gotten married young, had we go ahead and gotten married, early in college when we dated, that we probably would have killed each other.
Yes, that's brilliant.
But at this age, with what I've been through studying unity for the last 20 years, when he would do something, I wouldn't try to change him. I wouldn't buck the power. I'd say, okay, you're taking this stance. This is what you want to do. I'm going to do this. All I can do is control what I can do. Not what you're doing. I can't change you. And so then I'd say, well, okay, I'm going to take this path then on this issue, and he'd be okay. And so, I think that you have to take into consideration how much experience you've had in life,
right?
Too.
Well, I love that, Sharon, because it's a perfect example of soul agreements and soul growth, that you two loved and cherished each other so much that you would first meet up and have that incredible spark, but your souls each knew, like, okay, not now, because you guys will blow it. If you do it now, you both have to go your own journeys, and you've got to learn, your own, like, you getting involved with unity was so important in your journey, and all of those things, so that when you come back together, you would be able to hold your power and empower each other in that relationship. And that's also what we do when we reincarnate with someone. I mean, the story you just told is like compressing it into one lifetime, but you can imagine if you left the lifetime earlier, then you might come into another lifetime with him, in an agreement to finally make that power balance work correctly.
Yeah. No, I believe that it would have been another lifetime, but we also agreed that whoever died first, the other one wouldn't wallow in grief. That we would just try to pick up and go on, and so I know that he is pushing me right now. I've had so many wonderful things happen in the last few weeks since he died, and I know that he's causing some of those.
Definitely. You're making me want to talk about something here. I'm going back for a minute. If your soul agreement is 9, because I have learned in my life, and everybody's pattern is different, so I really want you to study your own pattern of relationships, but I am incredibly drawn to 5-path souls, and I've fallen in love with probably every 5-path I've ever met, and as when they were in my life and I was single, really challenging relationships with 5-path people, men, where I learned ultimate lessons of surrender and let it go. And you've got to be okay on your own. You can't merge with this person. And Paul, my husband who died, he was a 5-path soul. And our agreement was the number 9, which is all about letting it go, surrender it. And in that case, it was surrender him to the divine. And then in people who are alive here, who I have that 9 soul agreement with, it means that we're not going to be day-to-day best buddies, but we're going to love each other fiercely. And when we're together, it'll be that high vibration of the 9, but some letting go as part of it, you know. And I've learned that energetically over the years. And it just fascinates me how it helps me navigate even friendships better, you know?
Yeah.
All right. Who was the other person? Nikki?
I have a question too. Can you hear me?
Hilda. Yes. Hilda.
I just have a quick question. I just figured out that all my 3 kids are 5 paths. Their birth paths are the number 5. So first of all, is there a significance in that when all 3 of them are the same?
Yeah. I mean, that's quite a household there. You know, I would say that you're getting vitality from them. That's quite an energetic brew. And also they're all here to learn fearlessness. And so you, as their mom, Hilda, I can't remember your path number, but whatever.
I'm 1.
You're 1. Okay. So it's your 1 path is about being a leader and a visionary, and your house is filled with these fearless 5-path souls who are here to be adventurous and not follow rules and be passionate and all of that. So you have to be a little bit loving in letting them go off and make mistakes and break rules, because that's how they're learning on their journey.
Right. And so that means that I have the same soul agreement with each and every one of them.
The beautiful number 6.
Right? Okay. Got you. All right.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue.
Sue, I have a question.
Yes.
I think I figured this right. So I think my husband is a 1 and my soul path's a 4. So that would make us a 5, right?
Passionate, adventurous, traveling, but kind of like rubbing each other like friction to make you each grow. Does that make sense?
Right. And then if my son if I'm a 4 and he's a 4, does that make us an 8?
You have the 8 soul agreement.
Okay.
So I'd love to hear that story someday. How old is your son?
He was born in 79. Never know how old is he going to be, 40, 43 or 44. I think it's going to be 44.
Have you noticed that 8 agreement playing out in your relationship with him?
Well, I just now, we have a real interesting relationship. So I want to get together with you on a reading. Yeah. I want to schedule that.
Okay, good.
I want to find that out.
Because the 8-path soul agreement takes work, you know, especially if it's mother and child.
24/7.
Yeah, you know, because a mother inherently wants to help the child, save the child, tell the child what to do, all that stuff. And if the agreement is 8, then the more you back off of that, the better the relationship will be.
Thank you.
Okay. I thought Nikki had a question.
I do. I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
If there's an 11-2 and a 22-4, is the soul agreement 6, the soul path, the 6 for that?
11-2 and a 22-4. The soul path is a 33-6. I mean, the soul agreement is a 33-6. Can you hear me, Nikki?
Yes.
So I'm just trying to see if I have that. Oh, there it is. If your soul agreement is 33, that is quite a mystical connection. And who did you say those 2 people were?
Me and Joe. Joe, how's your birthday?
Oh, okay. Well, it's very 33 mystical. I mean, it can be the best of anything, but you really do have to kind of ground it in. Someday, if I look at your path and your chart, we can see if hopefully you guys have some earthy signs in your your sun sign or something to keep you grounded. When people
December 29th, I had a reading with you.
Okay. And I can't remember, Nikki, so when I do a reading for people, I have to clear it out of me before I go on to the next client. So I never can remember people's past, but I have folders. I'm such a good Virgo that if you come back to work with me, all your chart stuff is still in your folder and I can pull it up and remember it then.
So it's a mystical connection.
Yeah. It's a mystical connection, and it really helps you reach a divine perspective together. I mean, I would say you guys should be meditating or doing spiritual pursuits together. All of that stuff, you have a real potential of kind of an enlightened partnership.
Okay.
All righty. Anybody else on soul agreements before we
I
move
have
on?
a question for you.
Okay.
So soul agreements are, you take the two reduced numbers, the birth path of each people. How do you get 33 when the two highest numbers could possibly be 9? How can you get a
Were you in our class last week?
I was.
Yeah. So do you remember we talked about the 3 master soul numbers? Let me go back to that
So
page.
when you do the soul agreement number, you don't reduce. So if somebody is a 22, you're going to add it as a 22.
You're going to add it as a 22/4 added to an 11/2 gives you a 33/6. Does that make sense? Does that answer it for you?
It does. That was my missing piece.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay.
Sue, we don't seem to have these pages.
I know. You know what I just figured out, Sarah? I was still working on the workbook right up until class started, so I revised it again. So I will send this more revised workbook to you all tonight because I finished all the name number stuff and the pinnacle years, which we're also going to talk about. And then I realized, oh, I don't have the soul agreements in there. And I went in and added it, but it's not in the one that you have. But I will get it out to you tonight, I promise.
Oh, thank you.
So any more about soul agreements? Because we got a lot I want to cover in here. And so anyway, if you need more, I'm going to be sending you this revised workbook. I just can't stop working on it, trying to make it good here. So let me see where we are. Yeah, we're here at the name number now. The name number, and I'm just going to tell you my relationship with name number is when I first studied numerology in 1980, I was kind of obsessed with the name number, and I was really fascinated with how your name carries a vibration that tells really how the world reads you, which is very different from what you are here to accomplish, which is the birth path number that we've just talked about. So I learned doing this that the name I was born with, which is different from the name I have now, was missing so many numbers in it. And if you read on this page, when you calculate the missing numbers from your name, you understand the challenges that you've included in your birth plan for this lifetime. Well, Sue Ellen Nolan, who was born in 1951, even when my numerologist did this chart for me back in 1980, she said, the only other person I've seen with this many challenges is Yoko Ono. So I've always felt very close to Yoko Ono because apparently she agreed to lots of challenges in her life as well. But when you find out, gee, you only have maybe 3 numbers in your name, then it starts to help you understand, wow, I was quite a brave, maybe over arrogant to think that I could do all of this. But then what you learn is when you change your name, and I changed it to Sue Frederick when I married Paul, it sends out a different vibration to the world, and it helps you a little bit, but it still doesn't change what your soul came to do. And so I just want you to know, even if you have felt that your name didn't have a positive vibration and you changed it, that helps how people around you see you or read you, but it can't change your own personal plan and what you've come to do or learn. So as you add this is your chart. As you figure out the letters, every letter, let me get the cursor. So, Sue starts with S, and so that's a 1, and then U is a 3, and then E is a 5. And so you start, get to my next slide. Okay, I used a name of a girl that I loved so much growing up. She is one of the people who died right after Paul and Chrissy died. And just, gosh, I can't even tell you how much I loved her. And we definitely had some kind of soul agreement. And when I was figuring out numbers in 1980, I went and kind of looked at her numbers, and this name gives you an example of how you would do that. Because as I added all of her vowels in her name together, I got 13-4. I added all the consonants, personality number. That's how you show up in your personality. And then the total of both of those give you the vibration you're sending out in the world. That's really kind of sometimes the overriding vibration that people pick up from you. And so if you look at how, this is how I used to do, this is a picture from my original numerology workbook from 1980 when I did Jane's numbers. And up here in the top, you can see the chart that gives the numbers to the letters. But then here on this photo, you put the vowels numbers above the name so that you can keep track of what the vowels are. You put the consonants below so that you can see it clearly like this. And then you add the top row of your vowels to get that number. And then you add the bottom row of consonants to get this number. And then you add those two together, you get the 6. And that told me a lot about Jane's life and her 11 personality that I was so close to and so drawn to, and her 6 vibration of essence. She was just so beautiful. I was so enamored with her, loved her so much. And so I looked at her name number a lot just to try to understand, because she had left so early. Chrissy got leukemia and crossed over, and she'd been my lifelong girlfriend. And then literally a year later, Jane got breast cancer and crossed over. And so I was just fascinated with what can I learn from numerology to understand why I loved them so much and why they impacted me. And here, when I looked at the missing numbers, and this is how you calculate your missing numbers. Again, you take this top line, you have all your numbers across here, and then you add, I'll just maybe here it's easier to see it. Well, maybe not. So then you go through the name number and you go, oh, Jane had 4 1s in her name. Okay, she had 1 2, she had 1 3, no 4s, she had 4 5s, and you go through it like that. And then you can see, oh, she's missing 4s and 8s. Now that's so interesting because, I'm a 22-4, and she has the most 5s and 1s. Now, when you look at that vibration, and it takes a while to kind of understand it, but what it means is she had so much charisma. Even in her name, it was like people would feel her charisma even before they met her. And the 1s as well made her, have to really find her confidence and be strong, and all that combined made her a very unforgettable character, a very beautiful, powerful woman. And then if you go here, you can do this for yourself. Write your name in here, and then using the chart above, you can see the value of every letter. and just count, how many ones do I have, how many twos, how many threes, and what numbers are missing and what numbers do you have the most of. And what's the missing number means is that in Jane's life, she was going to have to deal with learning to work hard, and she didn't want to work. She was so funny and playful and beautiful, and work was not something she loved. And in school, I would sometimes do her homework for her and help her with different things like that. And she was missing eights. And that's so interesting because an 8 is a number of money and power. And she was born into a very wealthy family, and she was never going to have to worry about money in this lifetime. And I just thought that was really curious that she was even just missing the number 8, because it wasn't even something that was going to be part of her journey if she had stayed in this life, or even for as long as she was here. So you can just read it like that. And I know we're getting deep into numerology here with name numbers, and all of this stuff takes a long time to really understand. But what you can do is look at your own name and say, gee, I'm missing, for example, in my case, I'm missing most of the numbers and I only have a few of them in my name. And what does that mean? Well, clearly it means that I agreed that I was going to take on a lot of grief. I was going to take on a lot of questioning life and trying to fit in and being super sensitive from early on, because I was determined to grow in this lifetime. There's just no other explanation for it. I think I'd been kind of wasting my time in some other lifetimes. And in this one, I probably had a stern meeting with the Council of Elders. And they said, you keep going down there and just forgetting what you're there for. So are you serious about evolution, soul evolution? And I went, yes, please throw me in, coach, give me another chance. And so they wrote this incredibly challenging lifetime, and I said yes to it, and here I am. So some of you may feel that that's also your story. Now, if you find that you have every number, you're not missing any of the numbers, and you're a lot of stacked numbers, like you have 10 of this number, not 10, but a lot of something, then that's a different energy that says the lifetime will not be as intense, but there will still be a few lessons. Go ahead. Somebody's asking a question, I think. Was somebody asking a question there?
Hi, Sue, this is Liz. Mm-hmm. I have a question. Mm-hmm. So for me, my birth name is Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. My kindergarten teacher, long story, chose to call me Liz because I was struggling with writing Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. And then I had a grandmother who I had a special relationship with that called me Lisa. So pretty much everyone called me Liz. So what on your birth name would I choose, Elizabeth?
Well, you would do both. You would first do the birth certificate name, because that's going to give you a pretty clear vibration of your intention for the lifetime. But then it's interesting, everything's on purpose. So that first grade teacher shortened it to Liz. That's not an accident. So it would be really interesting to see what the different number vibration is for the name Liz, and how that's affecting your impact, your relationships, etc.
Got it. And then with my grandmother, who called me Lisa, and no one else ever did. And we had this
you should
interesting, like when I would call her, she knew it was me, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And it was just that one individual.
Well, you should definitely do it all Lisa, Elizabeth, and Liz. And I think you'll be fascinated by the difference and what you can learn from that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions about name, number? And again, this is in the workbook, either that you have or that I'll be sending out again tonight.
I have a question. Sorry.
Yes, Jennifer.
It's Jen. Yeah. So do you just do your first name, or do you add your middle, your last,
the middle,
and then if you're married?
The whole name. So for example, Jane Ann Crosby is the name that she was born with. And that's what I'm working from. And then my name that I was born with, Sue Ellen Nolan, has a completely different vibration from Sue Ellen Frederick, and a very different number configuration. And so I look at both of those, and in my notebook, if you saw my 1980 numerology notebook, I have all these notes like, after Paul died, I said, I will never change my name back to Sue Nolan for a number of reasons, including the fact that it's a bad vibration name for me. And so, be comfortable changing your name to whatever feels right, but just know that the original intention of the life is written into the birth certificate name.
Okay. And then I have another question adding on to this. So when someone has the exact same birthday date as you, and they're born the same year, everything, can those two, like, it seems weird, like, would those two people be the same, or is it then the name comes in and makes it so that, no, you might have the same number, but you're totally different
I
people?
work with a lot of twin clients, Jennifer. So it's really fascinating because they're all born on the same day. They have the same birth path, the same personal years. Their names sometimes are also very similar. Like back in the 50s, people would name twins like Pat and Paul, just very similar names. And yet what I've learned is that the twins each take very completely different routes to learning what their soul came to learn on that path. So one of them may take the path of doing everything right, being a perfect student, never breaking any rules, and learning kind of that way. And then another one will do the opposite, go off on the, wild and rebellious road to evolution and learn that way. But when they meet together again later in life, or else in the divine, when they cross over, what they find is that they get to share kind of some of their journey with each other and learn how the other person learned in their life. So it's almost like a benefit. The twin gets to kind of benefit from how their twin is living and what their twin is learning. Now, if it's not a twin, it's just a random person, it means that if you look into their life, you will probably find that they had similar challenges at similar times that you've had, similar ages, similar personal year moments, Saturn returns, and that they had to walk through them. It's funny because I met this person randomly who had the same date of birth as me, the same path and everything, same year. And she was in 9/11, in the middle of she was in the building when all of that went down. As we talked about it, it was almost like talking to another version of myself, of somebody who, in the midst of that chaos, she knew she had to help people somehow, and she found this way to help bring people out, and just strong and good, and yet the same kind of challenges as me as well. As we talked, even though our lives were totally different, we had different careers, we lived in different places, there was a kinship to it that I found very fascinating.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, go ahead.
Sue,
mm-hmm.
Is in the workbook, I see how to calculate all this, but the meaning of the numbers, is it the same as or similar to birth paths?
Yes. So the meaning of the numbers that we talked about in the first class, and that's in the workbook, and that's always the vibration of it. You just change it a little bit when you're talking about, like, 8 is about power, for example, about owning power spiritually, emotionally, physically, financially, and not abusing power. And so when you apply that to a soul agreement, it means it lives in your relationship with somebody. When it's your birth path, it's your lesson for your life for this lifetime. When it's in your personal year, it's what you're experiencing for the year, that questions will come to you that make you have to step up to your power. Does that answer your question?
And then so the name, it's the same way.
And the same in the name as well.
Okay, cool.
You know, you can really fall down the rabbit hole with numerology. So that's what I wanted to tell you all, that doing it for decades, what I learned is that what resonated most in the big picture for helping clients was to focus on the birth path, the soul agreements, and the personal years. And I would not bring up name number because it would just start to get people a little too confused. You know, like I wanted a person to come away from a session with clarity of purpose, because from my point of view, if you understand your purpose here, the rest of it can fall into place. And so that's why in my work, in my personal, in my books, in my client sessions, I really focus on the birth path, because you can learn a lot from your name and it's fun, but it's just not as important really as learning what you came here to do. In my opinion, that's just my take on it. But what's interesting is that now when I have clients, one of the questions I ask them on the form when they sign up is, give me your name at birth or something like that. And what I do with it now, after all these years, is I put my hand on that birth name. I don't calculate it out. I simply put my hand on it and feel the energy of it. And you can just really feel the intention of a soul in that birth certificate name. Now, here's a funny story about names. When I was pregnant with Sarah, my daughter, she came into a dream and told me right away that her name was Sarah. And I had never even thought of, I thought I couldn't have children. I cried about that, grieved about it. And then at the age of 43, I got miraculously pregnant, and she came into a dream right away and said, she was going to be my daughter and her name was Sarah. That's my favorite dream in the world. I have to tell you again, I didn't even know I was pregnant, and I went to sleep. I had missed a period, but I was in my 40s and who knows? And so I went to sleep and I flew into this white house, this beautiful, big, spacious house with white rooms. And I flew into a room and there was my daughter. I hope I didn't tell you guys this story last week. Forgive me if I did. But she was this little girl with blonde hair and brown eyes. And she stepped forward and I said, "Are you my baby?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "You're going to be a girl?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "What's your name?" And she said, "Something soft like Sarah." And then we had a little more conversation, but I told her I loved her. And then she looked me in the eye with this ancient wisdom of soul and said, "And I really love you." And my daughter was born months later, and she looked exactly like that, and her name was Sarah. And when we were picking out her full name for her birth certificate, I was thinking about numerology, and I wanted to protect her. This is crazy. This is what mothers do, I know. But I thought, I'm going to give her a lot of names with a lot of numbers, because you guys, I'm telling on myself here, so you can't make fun of me for this because I'm confessing it. But I said I need to give her a lot of names with a lot of letters so that she doesn't have a challenging life like me. And so we named her Sarah Elizabeth Amélie, which was my French Creole grandmother's name, Sarah Elizabeth Amélie, and then her father's name, Molly. And so she had no missing numbers in that name, and I was very happy to set that up. And then numerology, I have to tell you, this is where people go wrong, because I went wrong with that. We cannot control a path or even another person's birth plan. My daughter has had a lot of challenges in this life. They're just different from mine and how mine showed up. But you can even see them now when you look at her name and see how many numbers she has of this or that. And so she and I joke about it. And she goes, "Thanks, Mom. You loaded me up with 4 names. It's caused me all kinds of trouble in my life." And so the message to you all is, you can't control really, once you're down here, another person's path. If they've agreed to something, they're going to find their way to it, no matter what you name them or no matter when they're born. So numerology is simply the tool that the soul uses to help us understand the journey. So your pinnacle cycles, I want to talk about this because this is also a very interesting part of it as well. During your life, you experience 4 pinnacle cycles, and they're different, of course. Numerology loves to be complicated, but during each pinnacle cycle, there is one major lesson or goal that you're kind of focused on at that period in your life. And you can think of it that the pinnacle number you're experiencing is pushing your soul to grow in a specific area. So when I look at my journey, these are the pinnacle cycles. And as you can see, if your life path is 1, then your first pinnacle lasts until you're 35. If it's 2, it lasts till you're 34. If it's 3, anyway, you can just go down this chart and see. Now I happen to be on the 22, which means that my first pinnacle lasted from birth till the age of 32. And it's so fascinating because let me just tell you how applicable this is. Then my second one was from 32 to 4, and I got to show you how to figure out the pinnacle numbers. Oh, I'm missing that page. Oh my gosh. Well, more revisions are needed here. But anyway, there's a way to calculate your pinnacle, and I will include that next week because I was trying so hard to get all this done today and I didn't get that page in here. But you'll see that there are different lessons for you at different phases of your life. So 0 to 32, I was looking for love, that is for sure, and home and family, because my family of origin was not nurturing and loving. And so I kind of, the minute I left home, it was all about looking for love. And it's interesting because Paul died at the age of, when I was 30, and then, or 29, I can't ever remember, but I took a couple years then and moved to Mexico and just wanted to walk away from life. And that was still during this 6th pinnacle of mine, and didn't want to do my work yet. And then around the age of 32, I was starting to be a journalist and a writer again and address my work. And the 22 number affected me all right through this career years of 32 to 41. I was kind of well known in the natural health industry as a writer and all of that. And then I learned at the age of 41, I don't know, I got pregnant. I was a single mom in this little phase of my life. And it was the hardest phase of my life as I look back on it, because I was a single mom and felt so alone in the world, and my pinnacle number was the 1. And then at the age of 50, it shifted into 7, and 7 is spirituality and intuition. Well, guess what? Without thinking about pinnacles, because I never paid much attention to pinnacles, at the age of 50 is when I launched my true work that I have done for 20 years, like came out of the closet with it, you know, and 7 is the vibration of spiritual growth and intuition. So those pinnacles do kind of tell you the lesson you may be struggling with during certain phases of your life. It's another layer to add on top of all this, but I would say don't stress about it, people, because none of it's that important. But I will send you tonight how to calculate your pinnacle number. So sorry. The other thing is I really want to spend some time talking about our personal year cycles. So does anybody have any questions before we go to personal years?
I have a question.
Okay.
But this actually kind of goes back just to the name thing a little bit. I was kind of confused as to the longing and like the path, because I thought that like your birth path was what your soul came here to do. So why would you have a different number for longing?
So
wouldn't it be the same?
Good question. So So I came on the 22-4 birth path. So whether I longed for it or not, I had a lot of work to do in this life, and it was going to bring me all the lessons that I wanted to learn. And it would allow me to use all of my gifts and talents when I found my purpose through work. Now, my soul longs for, my longing number is the number 7. It longs to be in the divine realms. It longs to be in a retreat or at a beach or quiet and reflective and writing. 7 is all about all of those things. But even times when I do get to go and do a retreat or write or any of that, that satisfies me, but I quickly get pulled back into the work vibe of my path, of my birth path, the 22-4. So does that kind of answer it? Like, you might long for a certain thing and be very comfortable when you get to experience that, but that's not what you came to do and accomplish. Does that make it clear?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Gosh, I'm just trying to find. Go ahead.
I have a question.
Yes. Oh, is it my Christy?
Hi. When you were talking about your pinnacle years, your pinnacle cycles, and I see these numbers you have at the bottom below. You have a 6 and a 22, a 1 and a 7. Does that mean something?
Those are my personal pinnacle numbers for those years.
Okay. Did you say you were going to tell us how to figure that out, or is that
well, let me try to tell it to you, but since I don't, I'm so forgive me. I meant to make this workbook perfect, and of course I left that out, but I can explain it to you verbally, unless we think that might.
That's okay. We can just wait till you actually have it.
Yeah, because I
didn't know if I missed something, so I understand now. That's
no,
fine.
You haven't missed anything. I just messed up.
That's okay.
But I will get it to you all. Yes.
Great.
I have a question. If your longing number is 33/6, what does that mean?
Wow, you are longing for that really mystical. I mean, maybe when you were young, you wanted to do acid or something because you're longing to be in the mystical realms, to really experience that Christ consciousness full on. It's an unearthly, it's the longing of a saint, of a mystic, of a Christ consciousness figure. Who is this who asked me this question?
It's me, Hilda.
Hilda. That makes sense for you, right?
Yeah, it definitely does. That's crazy. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, sweetie. All right. Gosh, I'm beating myself up about the pinnacles, but I'll get it to you later. All right, personal years. Let's talk about this, because I hope that you all had a chance, and I'll just hold this page here again in case you missed the opportunity to calculate your current personal year. And I updated this page so that you can see, you take your birth month number, and then your date 15 is added together, it gets 6, and then the current year is a 7, 2023. So you add the month, the date, and the current year vibration into, you get a double number, then you add those together and you get your single number. And it may turn out to be like this, like I am personally in a 22-4 personal year this year, which I'm thrilled about, because it's all about my work, stepping up to the next level and all that good stuff. So that's where I am. And I hope you all have done it. On this sheet is where you calculate your personal year. And we can talk more about the meanings of them, but I also want you all to pull up those charts here at the end. And I hope some of you, at least, have had a chance to kind of write your age over here in the right column, and the years on the calendar, like 1951, I would put next to the first year of my life, and then keep writing it out all the way through, because it really reveals patterns for you. So I can either now spend, some time talking about the meaning of each personal year. I think we talked about it last week as well. Or I can also just take questions from you about, have you looked at this in your own journey and what did you learn from it?
Can we go to the question Nikki asked at the beginning? Because that ties in with it.
Thank you, Nikki. Nikki, step up and ask your question. Or thank you, Mary Ellen.
The question was just whether or not it runs from calendar year or birth date.
Such an important question, because there are different schools of thought on that. And I have vacillated back and forth through the years on what I think could be true, and what now I really kind of stand firm on is that every January, when the calendar year changes, it changes the vibration that affects your personal year. I mean, you can see that because now suddenly you're adding, if we go back to this sheet, you're adding up to a different calendar year. So it's going to change your personal year every January. And yet I want you all to think of it as a wave of energy. It's not like one day you feel like you're under the vibration of an 8, and then the next day you feel you're under the vibration of a 9 personal year. It's a wave of shifting energy that begins to affect you. And what I've also learned is that the month of your birth date, you will feel a heightened energy of the personal year that you're in. So my birth date is in September. Every September, I just might take notice and go, gosh, all of this such and such is happening. Like, it's so intense. Why is that? And I'll go, oh, the personal year is really exaggerated in the birth month. So for example, my last 9 personal year, the September that I was really struggling in because we had to sell our Colorado home and Jean was diagnosed with cancer and we were trying to move here. In the 9 month for me, September of that 9 personal year, the person who had said they were going to buy our house and had done a contract and everything backed out of it. And that was the ultimate surrender in a year of surrender for me. It was like, got me to my knees crying, like, what does this mean? And how can I let go of all this and still move through this? And so that was my birth month of 9 September in a 9 personal year. And it was quite an intense time of surrender. So that's how you can look at it. And then you feel every fall, you feel the energy of the next year sort of coming into your life. But you also notice that by January and February, it's full on here. And also I've noticed in June, which is halfway through the calendar year, you'll feel like you have no question. Like a lot of times a client will come to work with me and they're just starting out in a 1 personal year, the beginning of a new cycle. And it's January when we do the session. And they'll be saying, yes, but I'm still not clear how to move forward. I'm still not getting that clarity. And by the time it's June and I talk to them again, they're totally into the 1 and they're see their direction and they're starting in a new career or a new direction or moving somewhere. And it's all very clear to them because now the year has really unfolded and they're full on in that vibration of the 1. So it's kind of that wave all year long. Does that answer your question? All righty. So I'm going to call on some people to tell me if you have seen a cycle for yourself in these patterns. And also the Saturn return. I do want to talk about the Saturn returns because I cover that with every client and it's just so insightful. It kind of blows me away.
I've got one for you if you want a Saturn return one.
Yeah, tell me, Mary Ellen. Yes.
And it ties in with the June as my personal year and being in the middle of it is, for me, my first Saturn return at the age of that between 28 and 29 is when I met Ted, my husband.
Right.
And my second Saturn return, I was just 4 days into turning 59 when he had his stroke.
Ah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Mary Ellen,
our soul agreement is a 2.
And remind me of your path.
I'm an 11 too.
Right.
I mean 11. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. 11 too.
So here's what Mary Ellen is saying. She fell in love. If you can, I hope you can just see my little cursor thing. In her late 20s, in her first Saturn return, she fell in love with her husband, Ted, and they did the usual marriage and family and all that. And then she hit second Saturn return, late 50s, and her husband had a stroke, and it was life-changing for her because it really meant that she became a caregiver 24/7 and had to really go through her own personal journey of who am I, why am I here, how do I move through this challenge and this struggle. And she really came out of that beautifully. And that's a long story for another day, but she found her way through it. And the two Saturn returns were so related. I recently had a client who, in her first Saturn return, she had thought of killing herself because she was so lost in life and struggling with things and didn't know how to move on. And in the moment of that first Saturn return, she found a traditional religion that, or I guess we could call it fundamentalist Christianity, that kind of, pepped her up and gave her a community and gave her some maybe principles or guidelines of spirituality that helped her see things differently. And then she moved along with family and found a husband and all these wonderful things. And then in her second Saturn return, her child died. And she had to find a new level of spirituality to realize that she could still communicate with that child, but she had to walk away from the old religious dogma and reframe her life and her loss with a new, different understanding of spirit and God, and that we can connect to our departed, and that they want to help us, and that they don't want to see us here suffering all the time. They want us to be happy. And that brought her to a whole new spiritual awakening. And those two Saturn returns contained those two pivotal moments for her.
Do Saturn returns always have to be negative, or what is a Saturn
that's
return?
A really good question, Debbie. So for some people, the first Saturn return is when they get a clear aha moment of, wow, I'm feeling powerful in the world. I figured out how to make a good living. I'm feeling successful. Oh, I met my husband. It's really that sense of learning that they can survive here, that they can make a living, that they're powerful. And then they hit the second Saturn return, and usually it has a kind of more of a turning inward, going, does that really serve me anymore? Or is there a new level now that I have to step up to? And that can mean everything like reevaluating career, reevaluating marriage. Kids are usually kind of launched at that point. So those are 2 points in our lives where we really look for our purpose again, where we're really asking those questions of, what is the meaning of this life? Why am I here? And then the second Saturn return is really your soul saying, it's now or never. This is your last few decades here on this lifetime. So if you're going to get it right, you have to step up to it now in the second Saturn return, and everything will help you do that. So, in my first Saturn return, Paul died of cancer, and it sent me on my extraordinary spiritual journey of learning, which led me to, if I go to my chart here, hold on, which brought me to my second Saturn return, which was here in my late 50s. And by that time, I had turned the corner. For me, there was a big awakening when I turned 50 and 51. That's when I really stepped up doing my true work, even though I'd been kind of giving it away for free for years. It was when I was 50 that I had to step up and claim it as my career. But then by the time I hit my second Saturn return, I had 3 books out, and the world was the world was really pushing me out. Like out to get up in the world, and things were happening that were bizarre. Like I'd go to teach a workshop at Naropa University, and a New York Times reporter was there, like not anything that I asked for. And she writes a story about it, my work, and it goes in the New York Times. That's the second Saturn return saying, yes, you're doing your great work. You finally really stepped up to it. So now we'll just help you get it out to the world bigger than ever. And that's why I always tell people, don't resist that big work that's calling you, because if you say yes to that big work and it's what you came to do, it's really, the universe will take over once you say yes to it. And they'll had a client the other day, I can't remember who it was, and I don't know, maybe it's somebody who's on this call, but she was hitting that Saturn return and saying, gosh, it just feels like so much work if I really do what I long to do. And I said, no, once you take the first step in that direction and say, yes, I'm going to do it, the universe and spirit and God lifts you up and opens doors, and magic happens. Our job here on earth is to have the courage to say, yes, I am accepting the mantle of my soul mission. I'm going to step up and do what I came to do. Now, universe, make it so. And it does. It's kind of miraculous.
So I have a question, Sue. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that everybody's purpose is always tied to a job? Or can it be like not related at all to how you make money?
That's a really good question. And I get very passionate about my answer to this. So I just want to preface it by saying it's fine if you don't agree with me, because a lot of people don't agree with me, but I have to say what I believe to be true and what I've learned from my clients. And what I've really learned from my clients is we can tell ourselves that we can go to a job that we don't like or that's meaningless, and that on the nights and weekends we can do things that matter to us. In fact, our culture wants us to think that way, so that all of those miserable jobs will force ourselves to go and do them, rather than believing that each of us could create our own path, our own sacred work here, and make our living from it. Because that's a scary thought, and the culture does not really support that. It's a corporate run world right now. And so having a corporate job is what's supposed to be safety in this culture. And yet I work with so many clients who believed that and did the corporate work and did their true passions on the weekends. And 2 things happen. One is that that job really sucked their energy away, sucked their soul away. They eventually got health problems from it because their body was trying to get them out of that job. And there was no security anyway, because then the company either went under or they got laid off. And so what they discovered is that, yes, I have to have the courage at some point to make a living from what I'm really here to do, what my soul is calling me to do. But then you've got to figure out how to make it practical. So, for example, you might decide, for example, me, numbers and intuition. I had to call that when I launched it around 2001, I had to call it coaching, because that was a acceptable way then of saying, let me come and help you with your path, with understanding your career, what you're here to do. So you've got to frame it in ways that the world will accept and that the world will pay for, and realize that it's helpful and that it's needed. But nowadays, the world has shifted so much that, I know people who do things like sound healing for a living, and they are rocking it, and they have a huge income. It's a very different world now. You can step out and say, I'm going to be an energy healer or a hypnotherapist and have an incredible practice. And so that's a really good thing, because there are so many people who are here to be alternative healers, alternative something or other. And so now having the courage to do that, they can create work that they can make a sustainable living from.
Hey, Sue.
Yes.
This is Liz. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So when I had, and I almost, transitioned
mm-hmm.
when Michael was 2.
Right.
He transitioned when I was 59.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is my first personal year.
Right.
So how does this fit into, I'm looking at this chart that you have, and I'm an 11 too.
All right, let me go get your thing.
Yeah, I just wanted clarity on that.
So your near-death experience was when you were 2?
No, when Michael was 2, I was 37.
Oh, you were 37. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, because that's like already 3 years into a cycle. You're not in a Saturn return. But I guess your soul was choosing that time of relative stability to perhaps give you a precognitive experience or a moment of looking at your life from that higher level to prepare you for what might be coming. And then you hit that second Saturn return, and beautiful Michael, whom we adore, he crosses, and you've had your own near-death experience, so there is no death.
Yes.
And you're able to move through it. You're in a 1 personal year here. You can see here she's in this 1 personal year, and she's now putting it all together in ways that she couldn't really put together for a few years when she was in the deep grief and still coming out of that Saturn return and hitting the 9 year. And now she's in the 1, the new cycle, and Liz is just rocking it. She's really getting her whole plan figured out.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for helping me through that. Yeah, I was curious.
Thank you, sweetheart. All right. So we've covered name, numbers, personal years, soul agreement. I messed up on the pinnacles. I'll make that up to you. I'll send it to you, and then we'll cover pinnacles again next week just to get clarity on it. So in our final moments, what questions do you have?
Hey, Sue, I have a question. This is Delora.
Mm-hmm.
How do we find out when our Saturn returns were?
Oh, it's easy, because they're the same for everybody. So give me your path. What path are you on?
This year, you mean?
No, your life path. Your
path.
birth path.
7.
All right, so let me go to that page. Okay, so everybody's Saturn returns are in their late 20s, in their late 50s, and then if they live so long, in their late 80s. But I've also noticed that the one in the late 80s is not as intense as the most intense one is usually the one in our late 20s, the first one that we hit, because we may not be used to looking inward and asking those questions. And that first Saturn return forces us to do that. So your first Saturn return really especially hit you, because you had a 9 year when you were turning 29. So you should have noticed some big shift.
I did.
Yeah. And then the second one right here, when you hit a 9 year, when you were 56, you were definitely starting to feel it. And then you hit 57, 58, 59, all in this new cycle. Are you in that age now? Are you in the second Saturn return yet?
Well, I'm 65.
Oh, so you've gone through it. Good for you.
Yeah.
And you're also, so then you're in a 9 personal year this year.
I thought it was a 1. I thought I was a 1.
So you're turning, what age are you turning this year, 2023?
I'll be turning 66 this year.
Yeah, so that's right. You're in a 1 personal year. That's a good point to bring up. It's the age that you're turning in this chart. So it's, for example, if you look at when she turned 57, she was in a 1 personal year. When she turned 66, she's in a 1 personal year. So that's how you can read these charts better. So does that help?
Very much so, yes. Thank you.
So I would just like to hear from people in general. Do you see patterns for yourself with these birth path charts?
Mine is right on, by the way.
Oh, thank you, Hilda. Appreciate that.
It's just crazy because my first Saturn return is when I'm 28. I'm a 1 birth path. So at 28, I had my 3rd child, and I didn't have kids after that. That was it for me. And that's exactly when, after I had my daughters, when I had my aha moment of what am I doing? Where's my life going?
Right.
And literally 5 years after that, at the 9-year completion, when I turned 35, I was divorced. I was getting a divorce from my husband. And at 44, which is another 9-year cycle, I was remarried to my husband now. And then at 53, which is again the 9-year cycle, at the end of that, at 53 is when my beautiful Kevin passed away.
Right.
And then the rest is unknown. I don't know what's going to happen after this. But up until this point, and even the 17 is like significant for me in my life, because I was moving from one place to another. And so it's right on. It's amazing how those numbers are major turning points, at least in my life. So
I'm so happy to hear that, because really, when we're using the numbers correctly, they're helping us understand patterns.
Absolutely.
so that we don't resist the lesson, or we don't blame ourselves for a lesson. You know, a lot of the moms that I work with who've lost children, you know, they're always trying to work through the guilt story that everybody carries, but especially a mom carries when they lose a child. And when you see that happen in your 9 personal year or your Saturn return, it can take that personal blame away, where you can say, you know, that was pre-programmed into my life plan to hit me exactly at that moment of learning a hard surrender lesson, you know, and it helps you see it all in that bigger soul's view. And that's the point of numerology. The only point to me of numerology and all these things like astrology is helping us shift into that soul's view of life. Because if we don't use these tools to look at it from the higher view, we get so bogged down in ego and human stories and am I good enough, or is that person good enough, or who's to blame for this, or all of that awful human stuff that we do. And I would rather spend all my time in this outer space that we're looking at here behind me. This was from my vision that I had, my fever dream vision years ago, where the guides lifted me up and showed me this universe and said the light is always winning. One light is always sparking another and filling the globe with light, even when it doesn't look that way from down in the details. And the guides gave me that vision so clearly. And that's how I want to live every day of my life. And that's the other thing about our sacred work. Our sacred work, when we're doing it, whether it's artistic or healing work or this or that, it's meant to lift us above the mundane. And if you have to spend all of your day, all of your life focused on mundane earthly details, this is why people look forward to retiring so much and vacations, because they want to get that bigger view, that soul's perspective, that higher wisdom that you get on a beach vacation or climbing in the mountains or traveling to Europe. those things take us out of the mundane and give us that bigger picture as well. People think, oh, well, I'll be miserable until I retire. And then once I retire, then I can have that bigger view. But I've learned that that's usually not a good plan, because by the time you retire, I mean, my beautiful father always said that, you know, he said, I'll retire at 70, and that's when I'll play golf all the time and go fishing all the time. And he did not love his work as an engineer. He did it first when he was young, but by the time he was 70, he did not. And he died of lung cancer when he was 70. And one of the things he said on his deathbed to me was, when I think of all the golf games I was going to play and all the fishing trips I was going to go on, and that made him sad. It made me so sad to hear him say that. So we got to live this life all in, all passion, all heart, using our gifts, being fearless, jumping in and doing the work that opens us up and makes our purpose, our life meaningful. And the more pain we've been through, the more it's clear that we're here to do some meaningful, helpful work. Or what is the point of all this? Whether you call it turning your pain into your purpose or using your pain as fuel, that suddenly makes your life make sense when you're able to do that. So my prayer for all of us, and I guess we'll just close out, and I'll send you guys the new.
Sue, could I ask you one thing? Before, yes. I'm sorry, you mentioned before longing number. What is the longing number?
It's from the name number. If you go back to those
so what you were missing, the zeros?
No, the vowels. So if you add all your vowels together, and it's in the workbook, you can read it.
Okay.
If you add all the vowels together, it tells you what you
So
long
what if
for.
your longing number is the same as your life path?
That's so cool. You really set that up well. That's perfect. Remind me to do that next time.
Okay.
Like, I want to go back and talk to my spirit guides and go, couldn't you guys have come up with something a little easier, a little better? You know? But they're all nodding their heads going, well, it got your attention, didn't it? Yeah, okay. All right, my beloveds, let's pray out. I just want to tell everyone I am so grateful for all of you being here, for these amazing discussions, for the pure joy of lifting up above the earthly view to remember our soul missions, our soul purpose, the vibration that we carry through life, how people read us even when we don't know they're reading us a certain way, and how we can make the most of our journey, our human lifetime, and especially the most of accomplishing our soul mission that we came to accomplish, even in the moments when we feel overwhelmed by life. These moments of lifting up above, getting guidance, seeing the bigger picture, help us move forward. And for this, we are grateful, and so it is. Thank you all so much. Love you so much.
Thank you, Sue.
I'll send you the recording and the workbook and all that good stuff.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, baby.
Thank you. Everybody.
Thank you.
Love you.
Bye.
Everybody, thank you. Good night.
Good night.